Project Hail Mary is now playing in theaters. The newest space movie and the newest movie that was originally a book being turned into a movie. Now, speaking of book, I have read the book right before this movie came out. And I gotta say, I absolutely loved the book, so I had very high standards to what the movie had to bring. Did it meet those expectations? Let's talk about it. For starters, this movie is an absolute spectacle to watch. Every single shot, just made in space, looks absolutely gorgeous. This is a movie that is meant to be watched in theaters. I wish I watched this thing in IMAX. In fact, I probably still can watch it in IMAX because this entire thing is such a huge spectacle. All the space shots when they're outside of the Hail Mary ship alone, there's just these beautiful shots of space, planets, all looking extremely real, no green screen effects whatsoever. All of it just looks so gorgeous to look at that you could take any frame from this movie and just display it as a wallpaper background on your computer. This movie was made for the theaters and looks absolutely beautiful to watch in the theaters. And watching it at home won't have the same effect because everything that is shown throughout this movie, it only seems as big of a spectacle as it is and has much meaning behind it, is because you're watching it on this big screen. Watching it at home, it won't really have the same effect. While watching it in theaters, you feel the epicness of the scale that whatever is happening on screen is bringing. You feel the stakes behind it. Watching it at home, it won't really have the same effect. This is a movie that you have to watch in theaters. Now onto the plot itself. Compared to the book, I did think the movie was a lot funnier. Part of the reason is because Ryan Gosling is a part of this movie and I consider him more of a comedic actor. And not to say the book doesn't have its funny moments, but I wouldn't say the book is necessarily a comedy. Although, when it is funny, it's hilarious, but I wouldn't consider the entire thing revolves around a comedy. The movie, on the other hand, I feel like there is a lot more comedy-driven elements than there were in the book. I'm not going to spoil anything, but the story in both book and movie is definitely a dark direction to go, especially considering the certain plot points that leads the character to the area that they are throughout the entire movie. It's definitely a darker matter, not really a comedic type storyline to be going on, but since certain directions that the character goes down, certain things he ends up interacting with, it just makes this movie absolutely hilarious. And I feel definitely compared the book to movie, the book, reading a joke can have multiple different meanings behind the joke and not really land to certain readers, as well watching the movie on the other hand, the joke is most likely going to land better than it would in the book, so just on that default alone, watching that joke play out on the movie is automatically funnier, seeing all this happen, than just reading it on the page. So therefore on that factor too, it is a lot funnier, but you can also tell the overall vibe of the movie is definitely more funnier than it would be in the book. But a lot of those jokes did help a lot better. Some didn't, which I'll get to, but the overall feel of the movie, the jokes did absolutely land, and that was the main heart of this entire film. And speaking of heart, this movie is just heart all around it. I describe this movie as just that family movie that they go to watch during the weekend break. A movie that's right before the summer kickstart season, but the film that everyone just wants to go see. There's always a movie like that every single year, and I feel like this movie and the Mario movie is going to be that. Because behind that comedy, behind that darker storyline, this entire film just has heart around it, with multiple themes, the characters. This is just a movie that appeals to everyone. It appeals to all four quadrants of the square. And to me, this is why this movie works as well as it does. It plays into that humor, it plays into those themes, it plays into every part of humanity that everyone eventually goes through. It has something for the younger people to laugh at, and it has something for the older people to find meaning behind. This is a film that appeals to all, and that is the reason why I think this film is going to work for so many people out there. Throughout the entire movie, you're also just feeling this huge scope and scale of what is happening. You feel the stakes that the movie is setting up. And like I said, all the space stuff just looks absolutely spectacular. That just the overall scope of that, of just watching that in theaters, is immersive. And consistently, you are locked into this movie and never want to take your eyes off of it. Because something is always happening, something is always in the way, making the movie run at such a rapid pace that this 2.5-hour movie completely flies by and you never feel the runtime whatsoever. By the time the movie started, it basically was already over and completely flew by. As a fan of the book, I do feel like this movie got a lot right that the book still had to offer. If I didn't read the book before watching this, I would still love this movie just because it did so much right with comedy, storyline, characters. Everything's still great about the book is still all inside this movie. I still had an absolute blast with this movie and still loved it just the same as everyone else is making it out to be. I have a feeling this movie is going to be a box office success as it deserves to be because the book did sell too. The movie absolutely deserves it. With that said though, there are a few problems that any book reader I feel is going to come across no matter how good they actually like the movie. There are always problems that the book just always does better. Now, like I said, I do want to point this out, I still really did enjoy this movie. Right now, it is my favorite movie of the entire year so far. But, also with that note, I also really love the book. So, there's going to be problems that the movie just doesn't quite match. So I'm jumping around spoilers here, which might be hard to talk about a few little things here and there, but I just want to keep the spoiler free. Now for starters, I did talk about the comedy. Yes, this movie is absolutely funny, but when compared to the book overall just has a huge darker tone compared to what the movie brings. The movie, like I said, is appealing to everyone. That's why it's focusing a lot more on the comedy side of things. But when reading the book, it has that comedy like I mentioned, but also has a lot more of a darker element behind it. And I feel like that darker element and comedic elements don't always combine together in the movie. Because the book had a lot more darker elements than the movie had, which is one of the reasons why I'll get to my next problem I have, which is this movie rushed a lot of things compared to what the book did. I do think one of the main reasons this movie completely flew by for me is not only was it because it was good, but also to me, since I read the book, half the time it felt like I was watching a montage of what the book had to offer, just I was watching a movie version of it. Especially when we do get to about the first 30 minutes of this movie, when the character first wakes up in the very first second of this movie. A lot happens in the book right there, while I feel like the movie took its time and the audience had to piece together what this character was actually seeing, instead of being in the first person mindset of the character. I feel like just the overall mystery of those first 100 pages of the book was really missing. And the movie was just trying to rush to the main overall plotline. Which makes sense as the movie, but also I did really love that mystery element that the book had to offer. And there's just also a bunch of exposition stuff that the book really takes its time to explain to make sure the reader reading the book knows that plot point by heart. While the movie, I feel like it's just a blink and you miss it moment, and it's just a very important plot line that you just have to grab onto right when the movie introduces it, and you have to remember it throughout the entire rest of the movie. I feel like there are multiple moments like that where the movie just expects you to remember something, and I just don't know how a lot of this comes across for the general audience member who has not read the book. I feel like a lot of these very important plot points are just being completely brushed over or skipped entirely, while we're focusing on a lot more fun stuff in space. Because there's a plot point in this movie where they're actually talking about the main plot point and explaining how to fix it. And I feel like some very important knowledge that the audience members need to grasp onto because the book spent so long talking about it is just extremely rushed over and I feel like most audience members won't be able to pick it up in their minds right away. And besides that, there are a bunch of few minor nitpick storyline details that I wish were included. Because the book, I feel like, did such a good job at explaining the world building behind each thing introduced throughout this movie. When you do watch the movie, a lot of it just feels like a huge montage of what the book did. Now, like I said, this movie completely flew by, so in reality, the stuff I'm complaining about could be a huge chunk of the film. In that case, it wouldn't really be much of a problem. This movie just completely flew by and was still really good, but when compared to the book, a lot of it just feels like a huge montage. And I just don't know how well an audience member would be able to grasp on all those important storyline beats that were such an achievement in the book. And the movie just makes it come across as just a thing that happened to move on to the next plot point. Such as when you're about 100 pages in the book, the character comes across a certain something that affects his journey throughout the rest of the movie. And in the book, the character sees this as a huge achievement. It's the biggest discovery Earth has made. And in the movie, it's treated as a joke. Since we're not in the first person mind of the character, a lot of this big discovery stuff is not really the same way. It doesn't really have the same impact as it does in the book. And that to me was the biggest problem with this, since we're not in the first person perspective of our main character. A lot of these stuff that I feel like should be bigger in scale, should be a lot more goosebumps moments, are not there. Although the movie is good overall, the moments that needed to impact more, I feel like definitely could have been way more impactful than treated as a joke. But overall, Project Hail Mary is a great film. It's a spectacle movie. It's great for all ages. It appeals to everyone in that square, 25% all around. This movie that you need to watch in theaters. It's fun, it's lighthearted. Themes are really touching and appeals to everyone. This is the movie of the spring before the summer. And I hope it does absolutely fantastic at the box office, because it deserves so. When compared to the book, that's when a few things are a bit iffy for me, since not in that first person perspective, a lot of these big spectacular moments don't feel as grand as they did in the book. And this is another space movie and another great adaptation from book to movie. But anyways, thanks for watching. If you like this video, maybe these ones on the subs you too. Like, subscribe. See you guys next time. Goodbye.